Johnny graduated from St. Francis College in 2018. He was in our first class of post-prison students. You'll learn a lot today about our post-prison program. Johnny now works full-time at the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. And he's a nationally known activist against solitary confinement. He writes articles, he's written articles in the New York Times, USA Today. He's been featured in, I think, 3 or 4 documentaries about his work since returning home. So thank you so much, Johnny, for being here today, and thank you, panelists. And maybe before they each start talking, they can introduce themselves by name and what class you are in at St. Francis College. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. I'll use the mic for a little bit. Thank you, Dr. Horowitz. I appreciate your leadership in the school and not only keeping me engaged, but also to create opportunities for folks like me through the access education. So when she says, hey, can you come and moderate a conversation around education? I'm like, of course I can. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about education. I'm going to present for about 15 short minutes, and then I want to open up to have a larger panel discussion. And I want you to, if you don't already know these wonderful folks, definitely introduce these folks to you and have a larger, robust conversation between about the relationship between education and incarceration. Kind of peel back some of those layers. So my hope is that we'll walk out of here informed, that we walk out of here possibly even a little bit uncomfortable, which is fine, because when we get uncomfortable, that means that something needs to change, right? And then more importantly, we hope to kind of demystify some of our myths around incarceration and accessing education and reentry and things of that nature. Does that make sense? Folks, great. I'll try to project because I do have my presentation on this side. But like it says up here, a conversation about the transformative power of education. And it wasn't until my own incarceration. I served 13 years inside of New York State's prison system. During that time, went to 9 different prisons. So this is like a little journey there where my relationship with incarceration, my relationship with education was a weird one. Not only formal education inside of a college classroom, but also just my own edification, my own quest for education while I was incarcerated. And I don't have to tell you how much free time you have while you're incarcerated and how much you have the ability to actually read. Except that a lot of the books that are accessible to you while you're incarcerated are sometimes outdated. Imagine trying to learn, whatever subject you're studying with a textbook that's copyrighted in '85. Or there's chapters missing out of the book. So you get like this weird type of education, right? But along with that education comes this cyclical kind of situation, right? Where the more that you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know, right? And as a student, and even as a professor, you can probably identify with that, right? The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And that, in turn, right, fuels your need to want to know more because you start to ask, well, what else don't I know? So I read a lot of random stuff. Mainly not because of interest, but because that was the only books that I had access to. But I found that with the more education that I actually received, whether it was formal education inside of a college classroom or informal in my cell, just picking up a random textbook, I found that it gave me greater context about what my place in society was, but more importantly, to put my own actions that up to this point, I couldn't understand exactly the role that my thinking per se played in my ability to be incarcerated for 13 years. And therein lies the transformational power of education, where you start to see challenge, where you start to see opportunities where you saw before nothing but challenges, and you start to see stepping stones where before you saw nothing but stumbling blocks. And then suddenly, the whole world opens up. And you start to think of yourself differently, you start to look at yourself differently. For me, I cut my hair, I had gold teeth out my mouth. I pulled my pants up, I stopped using the N-word. I still find myself in solitary consuming cannabis, which is a whole other story. But there were some really internal changes, and more importantly, my belief system, right? The one that actually led for me to be incarcerated, the one that allowed me to handle my problems with criminal solutions, right? Respond aggressively and violently. That belief system, I had to literally look at that, deconstruct it and reconstruct it. Right? So, asking myself difficult questions. Johnny, why is it okay for you? Why do you feel it's okay for you to rob a store, for example, hold a gun to someone? What made you give yourself permission to do that? And but yeah, where does this belief system come from? Where does these values and ideals and even morals and principles that you say that you stand on, that allowed you to actually apply the criminal solution to what I've come to know today as poverty and oppression and a bunch of other layers and words that I didn't even know about before actually studying stuff formally. What allowed me to do that, you know? So I want to frame this conversation amongst the greater context of mass incarceration. You know, and for some of you who are studying, you know, criminal justice, or if you have criminal justice majors, this is very important to know, right? We have 2.3 or so million people that are incarcerated. And you'll hear this number over and over and over again. And the reason it's so significant, right?
It's fine.
The reason it's so significant, right, is because the United States leads the country in incarcerating people. Leads the world in incarcerating people. Right? We lock up more people than any country in the world. Right? Not only do we lock them up a whole lot more, we also lock them up longer. And for the reasons, when you ask why many of these people are incarcerated, when you really look at, they're actually public health issues. When you look at the fact that 40% of the people in Rikers Island are living with some type of mental health challenge, right? A lot of work that we did through the Mental Health Project, you know, was basically working with these folks who are coming back into a society that said we forgive you, that says that we understand but don't give you any medication, doesn't give you any continuative services, throws you in a shelter, and if you've never been to a shelter, I've had people refuse shelters and rather stay in prison a whole lot longer to get their addresses approved. You know, so that's the nature and danger sometimes that shelters pose for people who are formerly incarcerated, you know? So we criminalize people, you know, by one study, it was about 47,000 collateral consequences of having a criminal record, right? These folks are really spread out amongst our immigrant detention jails, our city, county jails, prisons, you know? These folks are literally sitting in our federal detention centers, which, you know, one of our panelists is gonna talk about that experience a little bit later. You know, but really looking at this landscape, right? You have 10 million children who have a parent that's incarcerated, who has had a parent incarcerated. And what does that do to a child when they don't have access to their kids? You know, myself, my daughter was born 2 days before I got arrested, and eventually I was sentenced to 15 years plus 5 years on parole. When I came home, she was 13 years old. Now she's 19, and our relationship is a whole lot better. But at 13 years old, after not being in her life for an entire time as a father, you can imagine the friction and the chaos and the agony and even the hurt, the pain and the resentment that was there to try to kind of bring that together. So when you think about reentry, think about it more than just education, which we're going to talk about today, housing and employment. But how does a person go back to live into a family that's learned to live without them? How does a family accept this person back into their household after living with them, after living away from them for so long? You know, how does a child grow up without a parent? Right? When we think about how, our criminal justice system has such an appetite for punishment, right? That even inside of a carceral setting, you know, the response for drug use, the response for mental illness, the response for just being part of the LGBTQI community can land you in solitary confinement. You know, that number up there, 100,000 people, doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at the fact that we also account for half of the world's isolated prisoners who are sent to solitary, like myself, are either consuming cannabis or folks who are just not dangerous to anyone or even themselves, then the picture becomes a little bit clearer about this appetite for punishment, this appetite for further oppression, and the idea that corrections has of, you know, the worse that I treat you, right, the more that's going to make you change, ever not knowing that in itself exacerbates the problem. You know, I had a conversation with the head of corrections last week, right, and he talks about, you know, ending solitary and so on and so forth, you know, and he's like, what else are we supposed to do? All we have is solitary. So part of the work is getting folks to reimagine and rethink about how we respond to people, you know, and what is the goal of corrections? What is the goal of holding folks accountable? Better yet, what is the line between accountability and punishment? Which may be beyond the scope of this conversation, but I really want to put those questions out there to get you to kind of challenge some of your notions around this topic. And more importantly, and directly related to this conversation, we know that out of those 2.3 million, right, 700,000 people every year are going to come home. And they're coming back to Brooklyn, Bronx, where I'm from, Chicago, wherever, across the country. Right? But what I'm trying to say is they're coming right back into our community. You know, and I'm open about the fact that I'm formerly incarcerated. Actually made a living out of it in a sense. You know? But there's people right in this school that you probably go to school with who have had contact with the system and you may never know it because of the shame that's attached to it, because of the stigma that's attached to it. right? We all want to be accepted on some level, but then we're afraid to be judged, right? When I tell you I did 13 years in prison, if I didn't tell you for what, chances are 90% of you will be thinking, for what? Right? Because when we start to think about why were people incarcerated, we start to get into this zone where, well, maybe should they receive justice or not? And I'm here to say that regardless of what you've been incarcerated for, you should still and always have access to education. That education is a right and not a privilege. So when I see signs on my Instagram say, oh, well, if prisoners get free education, so should mine, so on and so forth, that statement is still true even if you didn't refer to people in prison. Especially when you think about public safety. When you think about all the things you care about, like you'll find a correlation between the two. And one of my favorite people nowadays, right? So how do we get here? And I put Trump up there because that's our current president. But it's not just Trump. You know, I think it's easy to point the finger at Trump and folks who have supported him. You know, and I'm not here to change any folks' ideologies. But I think it's important to know that in 1980 there were only 3,000 federal crimes on the books. 3,000 ways that you can get arrested federally. Right? And then in 2007, right, there were about 44, almost 5,000 different crimes on the books, right? And I should have put my source up there, like Dr. Harzo's teaches, but the Rivera Institute of Justice is where I got this information from. And what that means is that there's more ways to lock more people up, right? And a lot of this verse actually came from, I mean, there's a number of things that happen, a number of different laws that change, right? But this thinking of, the system, switches from accountability to punishment. Let's just make them pay. Let's incapacitate them, right? Let's show people out in the world that if you break the law, this is where they're going to land, right? So incarceration is supposed to deter people, right? But it necessarily doesn't. Exemplified by the countless number of people that actually go back to prison and get reincarcerated. In 13 years, I can't tell you how many people I saw come back through that mess all again, and not necessarily for new crimes, which is also important. Now, when you realize that once you've been impacted by the system, once you got a pair of handcuffs on you, not only has your life been entirely changed, but once you actually do a sentence, your life will never be the same after that. Because the collateral consequences of having a criminal record are forever. And I get teased all the time about my favorite hashtag, felonies are forever, but that's exactly what they are. They are forever, and you will be responding and reacting to this kind of subclass type of situation that you'll be put in for the rest of your life. This switch for, this balance between public health and public safety. I mentioned people with mental health concerns, but we also lock up people who are homeless for just sleeping on park benches, right? We lock up people who are poor for sleeping, for jumping over turnstiles, right? When we ask, there's places around the country that if they catch you stealing food, places around the world, that if they catch you stealing food, they'll just give you food. In America, we lock people up. You don't believe me? Go steal a sandwich from Subway. You'll be in the back of a cop car immediately. So we respond to hunger, right? And a reaction to hunger, right, with incarceration, which then can lead to, of course, trauma, further trauma and oppression, and we can go down a whole list of things, right? The removal of Pell and TAP, because people who are incarcerated are not seen as equals, and if you're incarcerated, Johnny, then you should have thought about that before you got locked up. I'm not going to give you an education. And for a while, I believed that. I really honestly did, that I did not deserve an education, that I broke the law and I deserved to be treated like this. But then I ran into somebody like Khalif Browder, right? And you ask, well, he deserves an education. And how do I tell him if you don't do the crime, then you wouldn't do the time, don't worry about it? Or the other folks, countless folks that have been exonerated. Look, the exonerated 5, right? Folks who've been locked up for 20 plus years, convicted by a court of law, finally we find out that they're innocent. So asking the question about what do folks need, right, to actually get their lives back in order and give them the resources to do that. So the removal of Pell and TAP actually let people in prison say, hey, you're no longer worthy of an education. And what does that do when we release somebody into society who's been incarcerated for years without an education, and then we say, hey, by the way, don't break the law again. And Einstein, who's one of my favorite folks, only probably because I read a bunch of his books, he says you can't judge a fish by his ability to climb a tree. And when you look at our current system, when we look at reentry, that's exactly what it is. We're asking fishes to climb trees. We see the privatization of prisons, so now we have people who are actually making money off the incarceration of folks, and we look at the fact that our system is disproportionately black and white. I have a strong argument right? To say that, hey, we're actually making money off of the trauma of black and brown folks in this country. It's legalized. Some states have even, some private companies have even sued the state because they didn't meet their occupancy requirement. Right? Some of these jails and prisons actually mandate that the state keeps, 80% folks full. Sounding free, somebody was like.
He's talking.
Oh. Yeah, I think there's a button on there to turn the mic off, possibly, yeah. Thank you. So this privatization of prison, right, where, think about it, right? If a person's making $75,000 to $80,000 per year per person that's inside of my prison, and you're up for parole, why should I let you go? Why should I let $70,000, $80,000 walk out the door? I'm not going to. So we find that people in private prison actually abuse at a higher rate, held in solitary at a higher rate, right? Actually recidivate at a higher rate, right? And these private prisons actually a whole lot less regulated. If we have more time, I'll show you some pictures that'll make you not want to eat lunch. And then lastly, more importantly, right? Two-thirds of the people who have criminal histories have reported earning, I think within the first 5 years or so, reported earning less than $15,000 a year. And that is because, of course, the countless impact of having incarceration, but lack of jobs, right? But even outside of that, right? Because I think, and asking a deeper question, I had a client who did 20 years in New York State prison, came out, right? There were Metro cards where before there were tokens, right? People used to talk to each other face to face before they stuck their faces in the phones and started walking down the street talking to themselves. But it turns out it's this thing called Bluetooth, and people are not talking to themselves. This person was given an address to a building that didn't even exist anymore. He kept walking by it, thinking that because he didn't take his medication, that he couldn't find the building, right? And this person could be violated because he didn't report, and obviously sent back, and possibly sent back to a place like Rikers or wherever carceral setting was at. And lastly, incarceration does equal poverty. If you are incarcerated and if you have a criminal record, you are more likely to live in poverty in America than if you're not. And that is even, and the poverty is even more worse, I should say, if you're a person of color, because you have other layers to deal with. Even that if you wasn't incarcerated, you still face discrimination. The most discriminated person against, I guess, in America is a black woman who also has a criminal record. three different types of blemishes, if you will, or challenges or barriers to just be able to live in comparison to their white counterparts. The cost, right? And I use Rikers because it's very local, and I'm glad that we recently closed it, and we won't talk about that happens about that. But $187,000 per person per year to live on Rikers Island. How much does St. Francis cost? Anyone? Don't laugh. It's less than that, right? Excuse me?
27,000.
Right? Way less, right? You could probably send a few people to school, right? For that amount instead of incarcerating them, right? And when we think about what do we want, right? What do we hope to accomplish? The larger question, I think that on the surface and in the textbook correction says this is what we want to do. But I'll tell you something, when you're in that cell, when you're in there and this person has complete power over you, and you see the bullshit that they write you up for and all of this stuff, you start to question, who is the real so-called criminal in here? And I've written in my journal plenty of times that if you was to strip everybody naked in prison, you honestly wouldn't know who's who. Unless she's a woman, because, women in men's jails like that. But you would literally not know who's who. You would not know who broke the law, who's working there, because it's so rampant. National average that's to incarcerate someone is $63,000 per year. PR is the Prison Reentry Institute at John Jay. $75,000 a year to keep people in solitary where they don't have access to programs, where they don't have access to education, and then are released directly into society from solitary. Every state, if your release date comes up, you're going to be released directly from solitary into society, a place like Times Square, right? Think about that. Complete sensory deprivation, right? Drab colors, no windows, no colors, no sounds, right? And you get sent to a place like 42nd Street, And the Statue of Liberty is having an argument with Elmo. You've been gone for the last decade, and you don't know what's going on. And then lastly, when we talk about cost, it's not just in financial. And this is what I tell people all the time, these legislators say, oh, well, how much is it going to cost? How much is it going to cost? And I always say, well, how much does a human life cost? You know, how much does it cost to break up a family? You know, the risk, you know, an increased risk of breaking the law. You know, I can't tell you how many times I was pulled over just because I had, well, pulled over, and then once I showed that ID, police officers' complete demeanor changes, right? This lets you know that I was just released 60 days, and it's my only form of identification, and it does says real big inmate, the word that I hate the most. You know, they caught me at 7 o'clock in the morning, so I didn't even brush my teeth and shit. They say, you're either going home or you're going to brush your teeth. I said, I'm going home. And then because of these decreased opportunities, because of all these societal pressures, you find people who actually find themselves say, you know what, Johnny, I'm tired of trying to do the right thing. I know what I got to do. And I've had clients in the past who've gotten arrested, not because they wanted to break the law. You know, I can honestly say that every client that I had, that I worked with directly, you know, felt so beat up by society that it's a wonder how someone will leave the hospital and not been rearrested. I had a client said, hey, I'm literally eating out of a garbage can. You know, and if this application doesn't get approved, I'm gonna rob somebody, like literally. And I don't agree with that, I haven't been there, but I can also understand the frustration that society has created for this person to actually, and then ask them to navigate. So today, pulling back some of that, right, and this a lot, I gave you a lot to digest, but I want to pull some of it back, and I want to create space for this discussion to have. And there's one person that's missing.
Gerari is missing, but Lazaro is there, and I will edit that.
Yeah, no, it's okay, and I should. Yeah. And the reason I put the emails up there, and I kind of used moderator discretion, because sometimes we have these conversations, and you may have a conversation with someone, but these are folks who you should actually know, who are on your campus sharing space with you, where they show a wealth of information and life experiences that you can actually draw from, especially for my folks who are majoring in criminal justice, social work, you know, sociology. You know, I love the textbooks, but I also believe that a textbook is only going to give you part of the information, and for you to really round out your education, you're going to need to talk to people that are impacted by the issues that you're working on. Not just criminal justice, but whatever you care about, talk to those folks who are impacted by those issues to give you the stuff that the textbook is not going to do. So today, right, we have a panel discussion, right, and I'm actually going to allow them to introduce themselves, you know, and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then open it up. So what we'll do is that we'll actually start from Faye, and then we'll go down, right? If you can take just, hold on, let me frame the question for you, right? If you take just, please just take 2 to 3 minutes, right? And I did put the questions up there. You know, can you please introduce yourself? You know, tell us a little bit about your relationship and tell us a little bit about your relationship with education before coming in contact with the system.
So good morning. Up there it says Jeanette Owens. I am currently working at Urban Justice Center under the Mental Health Project. I'm a Brooklyn girl. My major is sociology. And I'm real smart, but I'm a terror. Like, I grew up in a family that hustled. So it was not a lot of nightlife in my life. My mother was a number runner, but my sister wanted me to have a different kind of view through literacy. So she exposed me to a lot of different arts, movies, plays, young. But on the flip side of that nightlife drew me. I think a lot of, you can be real smart and still make stupid decisions. And part of that is what happened to me. That's all I'm gonna give you right now.
Okay, thanks, baby. Lázaro, can you, yeah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lazaro Lugo. This is my 3rd year at St. Francis. I'm majoring in criminal justice. I was born and raised in the Bronx. I'm 43 years old. I currently live in Brooklyn. I came to love the Kingdom of Brooklyn. I'm now a resident of Brooklyn. Prior to my period of incarceration, which I completed 3 years ago, I was released after serving 21 years of my life in prison. Prior to that, I always had a desire for school, for education. I've had a love for art since I was a very, very young kid, and so I had a lot of potential, but I was misdirected and short-sighted, and I began to take shortcuts in my life at an early age, growing up with a single parent who spent a lot of time working. She worked for the Board of Education, my mother, and so left to my own devices, I became distracted, and so my life spent out of control in my teens, and I ended up being sentenced to a 15 years to life sentence. So, just want to thank St. Francis once again for everything that they do for us, for giving us the opportunity to participate in this program, for all your support. Thank you, John.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jeanette Toledo. I've always been on honor roll. I went to Catholic school all my life, from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. Education's always been my life, but you know, things happen. I got a 5-year apprenticeship to Local 3 Electricians Union. Yeah, I mean, as small as I am. And I got in by myself. So normally, to get into Local 3, you either have to know someone or pay your way in. But I got myself in with my education, and they couldn't believe. They were like, "You gonna do electrical work?" And I said, "Yeah." And they couldn't believe that, but I did. I got injured. Due to an injury, I had to get out. I got a herniated disc and torn ligaments in my right ankle. But that was a life of depression. It was unbelievable. I've always worked since I was 16. My goal was to be someone, and due to that injury, my system couldn't accept the epidurals. I didn't want steroids. I couldn't deal with the epidurals, which was steroids, and I didn't want to use opiates. It took me 10 years to be able to walk again. I had a back brace, and I had a cast on my right ankle, so I did it naturally, and it took me 10 years. But after that, I'm resilient. I got up again, but one thing led to another. I still took courses and kept on, but due to the depression, because after that, who wants to hire someone with a back injury? I was a liability. So I went into a more deep depression. The point is that once you get that stigma of that mental illness, that now you have a depression, that gets even worse. So now I had a stigma of mental illness, in and out of hospitalizations. My gateway to drugs was mental medication. And I couldn't deal with the back pains, so now I'm on a methadone program, and that's what led to my incarceration. So now I have mental illness, substance use disorder, and incarceration under my belt. But while I was incarcerated, I had books and I still read. So my major is on criminal justice. It was sociology, but I changed it to criminal justice because I did a 10-month cohort for AmeriCorps Peer Corps. But some of the men that I was working with, they were mandated there by parole. And when you see a man cry, several grown men cry, stating that they'd rather be in jail because they couldn't adapt to society, that got to me. And I changed my major to criminal justice. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is, I'm only going to say it one time. You will never hear his name drip from my lips again. My name is Helens Skipper. Please call me Skip. I am traumatized by Helen. Born and bred in Queens with Run DMC, and I'm going to say that I was a philosopher in my early years before I even knew what it was. I also want to say thank you, Professor Marino, who is my philosophy teacher right now, who has made me realize as a child I wanted to know everything. I had wonder, I had curiosity, I was precocious, I read. My parents were city workers. In my teenage years, I came across Donald Goins and Iceberg Slim. I read those books and I wanted to be in it. It sounded so cool. I wanted the street life, I wanted the hustler life. I wanted to do what they did. I started using. I still managed to attend college for 1 year. Actually, I told my mom, a high school educator, that I didn't like school anymore. At 16, she made me take my GED because I had already said I was dropping out. So I took my GED. She didn't say anything about college, but I had an older sister, and all I heard from my mother, oh, my daughter in college, she in the HCBH, you know, one of those colleges.
Historically black.
Yeah, that one. And in order to stop it and stop hearing my mother talk about her daughter in college, I enrolled. So I actually went to college before my high school class did. And it was a party all year long. In Queens, we went to student unions, Queens College, Hofstra, St. John's. There was a party everywhere. But my love of hustling and my wanting to know got me caught up with substance abuse, incarcerations after that. I went in for the first time at 18. I did my last bid when I was 40, 41, something like that. So I know I look like I'm 18, but ain't nobody laugh. But I am actually 53. So I've been in and out every year, whether it was a new charge or a parole violation. That was me. I never had a chance to get with education on state grounds, because for some reason that was for people who were long-term. Me, I went in and out. When I signed up for it, they say, hey Skip, how long you gonna be this time? Oh, 6 months or so, I just really got a touch and then come down on work release or something like that. They was like, no, you can't do it. But I always wanted to complete my education, and I am grateful for St. Francis for allowing me to do so. I am a terrier and love it.
Hello, my name is IRA Williams. Yeah, it's hard to follow up behind these great stories. My major right now is philosophy. I literally came out of jail September 6, 2019, and by September 8th or 9th, I was in school. And a lot of people fought and helped to get me into school, coming directly from incarceration. I did 17 years in prison. The question is, as far as I had schooling before, which is I actually attended college before, and I would like to say I flirted with college, because by that time mentally I was, already either turned off by college and/or I was in the street. So let me talk a little bit about that and the questions and relationships with education. So for me, when I went to university at 18, I was a statistic. I actually got accepted into the school because I was a statistic. Actually, I didn't know that when a university minority level drops down below 4%, they actually go out and recruit. And the way I was recruited, I really felt as though I was just there as a number, and that kind of messed with my psyche. And because of it, I acted out, and I found myself back in the project area where I was from, and I wound up meeting up with some old friends, and they was into selling drugs, and I started selling drugs. And a lot of it I didn't realize was mental, and I got caught into the actual rush and what it gave me, and I found myself with a 17-year sentence in federal prison. So, and in federal prison, as far as schooling, it was slim. Like Johnny Perez actually explained to you, they took out Pell and TAP into these institutions and basically allowed you to be warehoused. So like Johnny himself, he told you that the books were either damaged or it wasn't promoted, and a lot of programs are there as in theory, but actually being programs that's actually doing something or actually helping to rehabilitate you was false. And real quick before I wrap up, because I know I don't want to take over the show, and I can, but
Come on, son.
so even in criminal justice class today, right, there was a topic about rehabilitation, and I heard some of the students say that, you know, the people really don't want to be rehabilitated, and I squirmed in my seat because I was like, wow, and I understand that was actually a block in society that was they didn't know any better, and they just was actually regurgitating probably what their parents was told or what they heard on media, and the fact that we don't want to be rehabilitated was ridiculous to me. But I understood also that they needed to be educated, so I was like, wow, I was like, how do I engage this? And I was like, you know what, I said, maybe they'll be there, maybe somebody will be there to be able to tell them. And so, in closing, I'm actually happy to be a philosophy major in St. Francis, and actually I'm not saying this actually to make them feel good, but it's true. I feel good to be able to be in a mix of diverse energies and actually people that actually help. So yeah, it feels good. That's it.
Nice. You know, I appreciate that. I'm actually gonna go off script and just ask you each actually. I think you bring up a good point, Larry, about, you know, the statement of, hey, like folks don't want to be rehabilitated. And you know, I remember when I was in solitary, Officer Stevens, I remember him because this is the person who I argued with the most. But he said, you know, he had never come in contact with a person of color outside of a correctional setting. So deep, right? Because I'm like, well, where are you getting information about me from besides a computer screen, right? there are more layers to me than the fact that I broke the law, right? I also like cheesecake, I'm a father, I like to play the violin, I have all these other layers, right? So if y'all can each spend a minute and just talk about what do you find in your experience since you've been home? What is the biggest misconception that folks may have about incarcerated people? Or that you find, and there's no right or wrong, you don't have to answer if you don't want. You know, just take a little minute to think about that, and if you can just spend 1 minute expressing that kind of riff off of Larry's point about, hey, these folks don't want to be rehabilitated. There's also other narratives that are, you know, that I can argue that are not necessarily correct, and of course people want to be rehabilitated. I think all 5 of us, or 6 of us are examples of one that's needing opportunity. But yeah, if y'all can just flesh that out a little bit. Go ahead, Skip, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, because I got a lot to say on this subject. So
Okay, well, just give me 1 minute. So
I'm just gonna give you, y'all know I can talk. Y'all know I can talk.
Let me just warn y'all, it's not gonna be 1 minute.
Y'all know
Skip Mike should go last.
That's so unfair. So in my job, I am a peer, which means I use my lived experience in the mental health system and incarceration through substance abuse to help mentor and support others. What I fight hard for is the stigma. You believe just because I'm a peer, which means yes, I have a mental health diagnosis, that I can't do anything. Oh no, ma'am, I'm sorry. You're not talking about Skip, not me. So we go against that stigma, and it's far-ranging. We cannot hold jobs. We cannot have access to financial matters because we're going to steal everything. We cannot come into your home because we are ex-offenders. We cannot vote. I cannot live where I want to live. I am happily married, and I cannot go on my wife's lease because I have a criminal justice history. It took me so long to even do a bank account because with the wreckage of my past, my credit was messed up. And every time I tried to do something, they want to pull a record of my criminal history. What does that have to do with it? I have my own business. I went to apply for a $10 temporary street vendor's license because I show my wares in street festivals. I had to tell them I was incarcerated, and at that time, I was not scared of telling them that. And that just opened up a whole range of problems. Because once upon a time, I did some wrong things, I made some wrong choices, but now I'm a business owner, I'm incorporated, I pay my taxes, but you're telling me that I cannot do business and make money legally because I have a CJ involvement history. So then maybe I should just knock you in the head and take your wallet like I used to do. I'm just saying. Excuse me. It's stigma. And it's a stigma that we need to teach and we need to show and we need to model the fact that just because we went to jail does not mean we can't do or we can't be. And I'm gonna stop it at that because like I said, I can talk.
Thank you. Let's go right down on that.
Yes, I think the biggest stigma is recovery is not possible. And I'm gonna go with the aspect of,
Can you repeat that first part? I'm
yes,
sorry.
recovery is not possible.
Recovery is not possible.
Yes, definitely recovery is not possible. So, the perspective that I'm gonna take is, in family court. You know, this is the biggest, pet peeve of mine. In family court, someone could just make a phone call and make something up. Now, here you are, and they will go under the rug in your background. So if you have incarceration, substance use disorder, mental illness, now you're screwed because now they go through all of that. And just because you have that, you have to prove yourself. You're constantly proving yourself. And then they will use that to the max. And then they won't believe that you could recover from all of this. Mental illness is just an illness. Okay, you was incarcerated, you done proved yourself, you adapted to society, you rehabilitated. You can have all types of certificate of rehabilitations, whether it's a certificate of relief, a certificate of conduct, and you're sealing your case, or maybe it was sealed already. But yet you still have to prove yourself. You're constantly proving yourself to the world. Mm-hmm. Your case could be 20 years old and they will still pull it out and throw it in your face. Mm-hmm. And your child is still being put in foster care or with some family member. What's that about? You probably had some sort of substance use disorder 30 years ago, but they would still throw it in your face. And they still want you to go to some sort of drug treatment program or go do drug testing for a whole year. You constantly have to prove yourself day in and day out. That is my biggest grief that I have. As a mother, as a primary caretaker, you are constantly under the radar because of all of this.
You know, before we go into the last note, first of all, I want to acknowledge your courage to be able to speak about that. I know that sometimes talking about this stuff can be like a little triggering, you know, because you know we share our experiences with the hopes of educating others, but at the same time we also like trigger ourselves. I know, even just listening to you, I'm like, damn, over here, you know. So I just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge like your courage to be able to come in here and like put your stuff out there.
As a mother, as a primary caretaker, you are the number one that's taking care of your child or your children. They would turn around and put you in the ringer.
Yeah, and part of the and before we get to the last one, face like part of the stigma, right? Because there's also policies that are rooted in the stigma, right? It's easy for me to deny a convict a job, but not somebody's grandmother. So you see some of the stigma in the language, right? We give ourselves permission to treat certain people certain ways when we stigmatize them. But even more importantly, you can ask your psych teacher about this. We tend to surround ourselves with information that confirms our biases. And that's really deep when you look at your social media, when you look at your friends, you know, when you look at the places you visit, right? And what that does is that it perpetuates the same type of ideology without you even knowing it. You know, and more so, I think about, perfect example, I think about the woman who grabbed her purse on my flight to Boston when I was walking to the bathroom as if I would take her knockoff Louis bag and jump out the place. Right? No, nothing about me except that I'm a male and I'm a person of color at that point. Probably the obvious physical traits. But nothing about me out of that. You know, and I think what I'm hearing so far, you know, and I'll venture out to say maybe Laszlo and Faye's experience will echo that. It's this constant, this almost resentencing of sorts. right? Like this, like you did your time, right? You finished the 5 years on parole, whatever have you done on parole, right? Because some of us are on life parole. I think about Felix who was on life parole and they took him off of parole on his birthday, which is great. But some people have life parole, and then this resentencing of sorts where society is done with you, but now we have to constantly struggle and fight for our place in society. But more importantly, I have to prove to you constantly that I'm not who you think I am. And other times I want to feed into sometimes, to your point, Skip, about taking your wallet, sometimes I might fail to feed it into this false narrative just because. I remember when I first came home, it was just like that. But I really want to express the importance of how this stigmatization impacts folks and really regulates folks to this defensive type of position where they constantly feel that they have to prove themselves, they constantly feel that we have to disarm people, right? Constantly feel, I have friends who don't wear Timbs and hoodies because they have records, because hey, if you see me in this, you're gonna think, that I'm fitting certain criteria or whatever. Something for y'all to really think about. Lázaro?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is, contrary to popular belief, some of the most amazing people that I have in my life today I met while I was in prison. And in prison you see a small remnant of folks that are moving in a certain direction, right? And that direction is in progressive. And so when you gravitate to that small remnant, you become a part of it, right? And so I say that to say that there were times where I would go on the visiting room and my loved ones would come and visit. And so I would proudly introduce them to some of my friends or my brothers, my family, who the universe had given me as a result of me being in that place. And I would introduce them to them, and I would see they would look at them, and they would look at me. And they would look at them, and they would look at me. And out of respect to me, they would greet them and be nice to them. But then, when they were in their place, and we were sitting down and talking, they would inquire little things, what is he in for? Little things like that, right? And I had to be the one to educate them, because they loved me. And they knew despite the choices that I made that landed me in prison, they knew me, and they loved me, and they wanted me to have a second chance. But they didn't necessarily feel the same way about the other person that I introduced to them. So today we're in this room, and I thank God that everybody in here has the opportunity to educate somebody else about us. And when I say us, I'm talking about people who've lived life and learned and continue to love despite that, because I could wake up in the morning with a smile on my face and know that I could walk around despite what anybody thinks about me. I could smile, and although you're dealing with feelings because of the perception that you have, those are just feelings, and you may be having a hard time with those feelings because you're judging me for the crime that took place all them years ago. But I'm not the crime, and I'm not that person. And so my life is a reflection of that. And I look to give back every opportunity, every chance I get, so that I could break that stigma, but that I could also show that there is such a thing as change and resiliency. And that doesn't mean that tomorrow I may not fall and make a choice that I'm not supposed to make. But nevertheless, because of the experiences that I've had, I could respond in a more responsible way, have that ability, right? Responsibility to have that ability to respond the right way. So, so with that, I just want to say that for those of you who are coming into contact with people who are formerly incarcerated or who have had any involvement with the criminal justice system, sometimes all you gotta do is just listen, and I'm a firm believer that a tree is gonna bear their fruit. You should know people by their fruit. So,
Thank you, Lázaro.
So I just want to know what rehabilitation means. Way too broad of a word.
Well, wait, before. I just want to make sure we keep the question in context. Like, what's the biggest misconception? Okay, thanks.
So I've been incarcerated 23 times. And the first time I was placed in solitary confinement, I was 23 years old. And I was sexually assaulted by male and female correction. in a place that is not designed ever for rehabilitation. That is not what the justice system is about. It's not about that at all. But at this table sits rehabilitation. Simple, right? I'm hope. For every incarcerated person in the judicial system, there's a fair in the building. When you say rehabilitation, that's way too broad of a word because everybody views rehabilitation in different aspects. But if we're talking criminal justice, that ain't what they built for. I'm gonna say this, right? People that commit crimes are geniuses. Oxymoron for you. But in order to survive your crimes, these are plans, man. You had to make a whole plan to do some of the stuff I did. And succeed at that. Like, I wasn't the best drug dealer. I really wasn't. That just was not my calling. I did not give up. And in the same way that I'm at this college at the age of 57, I'm not coming out till they call me Dr. Faye.
That's right.
Rehabilitation for your ass.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's right.
I'll say something about the last time you said.
Pardon me for cursing.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about the last piece you said about criminals are genius or something like that, you know, and I'll tie it over with like Lazaro's statement, you know, and during my incarceration I met some of the most talented people that I probably still know to this day. You know, if you take a guy, you lock him in a cell here, and he finds a way to communicate with the person who's 23 cells down without ever leaving his cell, you know, it takes some ingenuity to do that, you know? And folks are geniuses. I mean, people carve out soap. People, this Latin type of talent that you think about why if this person was not here, this talent could be elsewhere. You know, and another part of the work that I do is to get folks to really look at these skills as transferable skills. You know, if you ran a gang, you could run a company. You know, if you sold drugs, you can run an entire organization. You know, you understand supply and demand and customer service. You know, if you've been bold in breaking the law, you can be bold in being real. And I always use the example where I laid in the bushes for like 3 hours waiting for someone to come out of a building, and then I had to humble myself. I could not even sit an hour in the lobby. And I said, well, if I can put so much energy into breaking the law, then I can put even twice as much energy in living responsibly, if you will. And for me, I worked my way. I earned my spot in prison, per se. You know, but let's also keep in mind that there are tons of people in this country who have been exonerated for their crimes, who are literally sitting there now for crimes they didn't commit. You know, so I also want to bring that into the room about how, you know, how faulty the system is in a sense, and how it really cages potential. You know, we live in a country that sentences juveniles to life. Think about that. You know, my daughter's 19. You know, like if she was 16. You know, depending on what state, like let's say Pennsylvania, for example, she can literally spend the entire rest of her life get sentenced to it. You know, and it gets even darker than that when we look at the border and immigrant detention and how those kids are treated. Not because of what they've done, but because of who they are. You know, and that gives us a different context in which to look at these issues. We'll move on. There's going to be one more question I want to open up for the audience because I think it's very important to have the audience engagement. Well, I skipped Larry because he actually started the conversation and he actually left. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go back to Larry, but he knows I love him. But I actually will reverse the order and start with Larry on his next question. And Larry, you can start us off, and for other folks on the panel, you know, what does education look like for incarcerated people, right? And again, 2 minutes, right? Is there access to college? If so, who's eligible? Like, work us through that process. You know, you all had different relationships with different systems, you know, federal, state, and city. So just, you know, talking about what does education look like from your perspective, who gets it, how does someone access it, or lack thereof. Just talk a little bit about that.
All right, that's my mother.
Oh. With respect, I still stand by what I said, but nothing but love, I will love.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so as far as the education system in federal prison, because I'm the federal prisoner here, or ex-federal prisoner, detained, federal torture, whatever you would want to name it, just warehousing. But see, the thing is, and here, when you hear feds, you think, oh, they have to be right. And if they did something, if they're incarcerated, they did it and they're wrong. And as a result of it, they give draconian sentences. And then at one point in time, there was a show that came out. Many of you are too young for. It was Barbara Walters, and she kind of made the federal experience, if you will, for this brief moment, made it seem like everybody who was federal prisoners was living this nice life that actually better than people who was inside. So then the law came out by a senator called Zimmer, and what he did was he made his business to strip the federal system of anything that remotely looked like it was something productive. Thus, the Pell Grants went, and all the type of physical things as far as even weights is concerned was taken. So what we're talking about is education. So as far as education, Pell and TAP, like the things that you actually have here, I don't know how many students are actually accessing it, but this is something that was in the system, and it allowed people to actually rehabilitate. And so when I came into the federal system, these things were gone, and actually, but the remnants, or actually what the taxpayers and the citizens believe is that there actually is rehabilitation in federal prison, and I'll tell you it's not. That's a lie. You actually have to fight to educate yourself, and even so much as that I actually suffer retribution at times to actually push certain programs like that I actually designed and taught. So the answer to your question is that as far as the federal system is concerned, they just really warehouse you, and it's sad, and if you really want to rehabilitate yourself, you have to go above and beyond, even at the point of winding up in special housing.
Okay, so I'm gonna base my answer off the state correctional facility. Don't get me wrong, I spent plenty of time on Rikers Island. I put the first brick in Roseland Senior Center. Now they looking to tear it down. And that's how long I've been going back and forth. But in the state correctional facility, there was only one facility, and then it was two. But the first one was Bedford. For those of you who don't know, Bedford Correctional Facility is the intake facility for women state prisoners. It's also the maximum security facility. So either you're coming into Bedford just because you're being intaked into the system, or you're staying at Bedford from anywhere to 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years. They had college at Bedford. It wasn't accessible. I was always a minimum or a medium, which means if I came through Bedford, I was just there temporarily, and as much as I tried to access, they even knew me, of course they knew me by name, I'm well known, but they would be like, Skip, how long you staying this time? And I would say, I think I got maybe 6 months before I hit the board, or 6 months before they sent me back down to work release. They'd be like, no, you don't have enough time, you don't have enough time. I was never able to access the college courses that was at Bedford because I was either coming or going. And that's just how it was. When you go to Albion, which is a medium to minimum security facility, they did have some classes there at the end, but the classes were very minimal, maybe 1, maybe 2, in a facility of 2,000 to 3,000 women, give or take, depending on the year or whatever. The waiting list for that was super long. Like literally, you go put your name on the waiting list, and it would be 6 months, 6 to 9 months before they even call you down for an interview. And again, those of us in Albion, we are considered medium to minimum, which means we might have 2 years left on the sentence, a year. Maybe we're just parole violators who, for some reason, and we have 90 days, they want to bring us all the way up there by the Canada border for reasons unknown. But it just wasn't happening. And then when I came home, no one talked about education. I knew nothing. I was so stuck up in the reentry process, just trying to get myself together. I was tired of coming home to shelters, institutions, or programs. But yet I came home again to a program and then to a shelter. I was trying to get myself situated. I was trying to find a job. I was trying to find anybody to hire me based on what I knew how to do, not based on the fact that I was an ex-offender. So I wasn't looking at Burger King and McDonald's, but this is where the parole officers was pushing you to. But no, I've got some college under me. No, I've got some intelligence. I'm not going nowhere to fry nobody burgers. I mean, fry fries and flip burgers, that's just not me. But that's where they pushed you to. So you come home, you try to get yourself situated as far as employment, as far as housing. I had kids in the system. You know, so all of these was like my top priorities. Nobody said anything to me about education at all. And I've been home since 2007. I just heard about these things like this last year in 2018. But here I am. So better late than never.
Thank you, Scott.
I fought my case from the outside, so I already knew what my sentence date was. So they call me a savvy businesswoman. So the reason why they called me that was because I knew when I went in, and when I went in, I already had everything set up. I went to the psych section. I went in there with my books. I went into a city jail system. There was no education there, but I went in there with books. So I lost my education when I went in, because I was getting educated. So due to my incarceration, I lost my education. So I went in there with my books. I did my time with my own books. I did everything and anything I could to go to the law library. I did what I had to do. And that's what I did while I was in there. I studied on my own. I went to the law library. I made sure I got a power of attorney to take care of my apartment, because when I came out, I needed a place. I needed a roof over my head. So when I came out, I had a place to go to. I did what I had to do. That's why they call me a savvy businesswoman, because I was not gonna come out to go into a shelter or homeless. I had everything in place. So I did what I had to do. And when I came out, once I took care of my services, I got myself into some sort of free educational program when I was able to. So I continued. I always try to continue my education. But while I was in there in a city jail system, no, there's no education.
It's not even a library.
I just want to say that in the 21 years of incarceration that I experienced, I was a recipient of programs that helped me educate and helped me develop and help me grow. There were people, just as St. Francis has opened its doors and its heart and its pockets to help us along the way, there were people that were volunteering to come in, and I did have the opportunity to go to school while I was incarcerated, and I managed to acquire 33 credits while I was in there. But I just want to leave you with this thought that I was fortunate enough to change despite prison, not because of it. And I think many people could say that on many different aspects, right? You managed to grow and to advance despite poverty, or despite domestic violence, or despite, illiteracy, all of those things. It could be anything. But for me, the most important thing is that change came as a result of me choosing to move in a direction. Just as we have to make that choice every single day, whether you're in the prison of your own mind or you're in a prison of some steel or concrete confinement.
So I was incarcerated on Rikers Island and there was no college education available. I already had a GED at 18, but because I visited so much, I wasn't looking for that. We're talking about incarceration and education. That was not my plan in entering. Like, I just wanted to be safe, and every time I went, after I turned 23, I wasn't safe. I don't know what it is about corrections in their train of thought, but for some reason it was something about me that showed I was vulnerable that they took advantage of. And I've never really talked about that in a public forum. I wrote it recently, but I've never actually gave that a voice. I know that I'm phenomenal. I know that. I have lived 2 lifetimes in one. And I'm not gonna cry, but I am phenomenal in the aspect of some of the trauma I've dealt with. I'm forever grateful to still breathe. See, what I want y'all to really get is that we're lucky. Some people right now in this very moment is laying in a bed with eyes wide open and cannot move. And we worry about the wrong things. I'm 57 years old. I'm sleepwalking, literally. 5 classes, full-time work. I am literally sleepwalking, but I am not going to bow out. So I want y'all to open your mind to everything. Everything is important to know. There is no such thing as I don't need to know that. So education doesn't only come in school. Like the people you meet. If you have police contact, you need to be educated on how to respond to that. Talking about education and incarceration. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yep.
You don't have to be incarcerated. If I'm not asking you to not be yourself, but if you being your authentic self, then clearly you don't want to go to jail. Sometimes we gotta just be a little less vocal. Cause I'm looking at big pictures. I'm telling y'all, they're gonna call me Dr. Faye. I'm not gonna keep working for people. I'm not gonna keep making me the poster child of your stuff because I have a lived experience. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna educate and empower some people. That is my goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for that. When I walked across that stage when I got my degree from St. Francis, I cried. And I think I cried. Well, in prison, you don't allow yourself to cry, and then you get home, you're like, oh, smack, I got my feelings back, and I cry for every little thing. But when I walked through that aisle, I definitely cried like a baby. And I remember my professors, Dr. Emily Howard, Sarah Platt, Sarah, were all sitting there, and I think they were crying too. It's like, what are you crying for? But I cried because I remember my arresting officers slapping each other, like they slapped each other high five when I got arrested. I remember being in the back of the cop car and the police officer was like, you threw your entire life away, you'll never be anything. And to this day, I hope that I've been looking for him, so I can have coffee with him and say, hey, by the way, remember me? The judge who sentenced me passed away, so I can't have that conversation with him. But more importantly, the folks who are harmed in the commission of my crimes, I've actually sat down and broke bread with them. one kid was actually the niece of the person that I robbed when I first got arrested. And he remembered that so vividly. He was 7 years old when I harmed his uncle. And the feedback that he gave me was so powerful, you know? And what I want to add is that, you know, people try to pick up the pieces on their own. Some of us have help, some of us don't. You know, but when it really comes down to it, it comes down to just giving folks opportunities. You know, sometimes we are exemplified, we are called to be that poster child and so on and so forth. You know, and I'm regarded a lot. And I always say, hey, if you think I'm dope, you should totally meet my friends. You know, and if you're impressed by me or anyone up here in any capacity, know that they're not no different than the other 2.3 million. Right? It really does come down to opportunity. You know what I'm saying? It comes down to opportunity, it comes down to understanding, it comes down to us closing our proximity and sitting next to any one of these individuals or not grabbing your purse when I walk by you on the flight to Boston. It takes for us to ask questions, tell us about you. You know, it takes us for us to invite others into our space. And those of you with power and privilege, it's part of your responsibility to create spaces to amplify these voices and these experiences. So I want to stop there, and I want to open up to the audience to get questions, and I'm going to come back for one last question of the panel, where in that last question, which you can think about, is actually, you know, what needs to change? So what do you hope that education or what colleges can do different to make it a more welcoming experience for people like us with our histories? But when you think, well, while you think about that, I'm actually going to go around and see who has questions that they want to pose to folks. Right here. Yeah. Please say your name and question.
My name is Charles Lewis. So this question is for you, Larry.
Okay.
Why is it important for those who are involved in the criminal justice system to get an education? And when answering the question, please think about how it changes their future and the future of society.
Sure. So how does
I think the mic is a little funky, so maybe you
so if I'm hearing your question right, how does education impact folks with criminal histories?
Yes, how does it change their lives?
How does it change their lives?
How
Yeah.
does it change the lives of, like, how does it change the future of society as well? So why is it important for
Yeah.
those who...
Absolutely. So what I'll do with that question is that I'll actually field the first part of that question, right? So if anyone can really shortly talk about the impact that education has had on your life, and then I can maybe possibly answer the second part of the question, which is a more macro view. One person, anyone. How does education impact in your life? Yeah.
Well, how it's impacting in my life is I'm leading by example. I'm leading by example for my 6-year-old daughter. I'm showing her that although I was incarcerated, I'm changing all my negatives to a positive. So I'm opening the doors for her. I'm showing her that mommy, even though mommy was incarcerated, look at mommy. Mommy's going to college, mommy's graduating, and look how what mommy's doing. So that's in the past. Look how well mommy's doing. And it's also letting other individuals that are incarcerated show them that, hey, although you went through that, you can leave that behind and you can do positive. It will help with education, it will help with employment, also with housing. Because with housing and employment, when you're incarcerated, sometimes, like Skip said, the stigma. They see that and it kind of locks that. It's a barrier. Education reduces the barrier.
So very quickly, last time you've been in the program for a while, so if you want to take that real quick, and then I'll finish it. Go ahead.
So, upon my release, I was blessed and fortunate to have some support, right? So the week after I was released, I started working on a construction site as a laborer because I just wanted to get myself back in, right? A lot of folks have this perception that they say, I did 20 years, I get out, I need to take a week or two for myself. I had already taken enough time. I didn't need no vacation time. I wanted to jump right in, so I jumped right in, fortunately. So I had a lot of menial jobs, right? I got released in 2016. I was blessed with the opportunity to step foot into St. Francis in 2017. In the interim, I had menial jobs. I tried my hand at, I like to cook. I think I'm a pretty good cook. I tried my hand at the food industry. I didn't like it. I did construction, I did labor, I had little skills that I had learned which are considered hard skills. But I also knew I had a lot of good soft skills. I know how to smile, I know how to speak to people, I know how to socialize. And my heart was always in the social services field. So upon registering and beginning college, so many doors opened for me. I was able to transition from those hard-working jobs where I was busting my back and coming home filthy and tired to working in office space and going into the social services sector where my heart was. And I acquired a wonderful job as a parent coach working for an organization, a grassroots organization in Brooklyn. And then from there, I transitioned to where I am at now. I am a fatherhood coordinator for community health service in Staten Island, and I have a program where I mentor and I work with young fathers whose girlfriends or partners have just given birth. So education for me has opened every door and has given me the opportunity, even though I don't have my degree yet and I'm working towards it, it makes all the difference when I put that on my resume.
Thank you for that. I'll add, of course with increased employment opportunities and being able to keep the family structure together, which we can talk about the benefits of society when families actually kept together, not broken up. I'll talk a little bit about some of the ideologies, right? Like there is a portion of society that believes that people who have broken the law, these so-called criminals, are born. That they have this incurable gene that you just can't change. Even at one point, there was doctors who believed that they can tell criminality by the size of your shape, the shape of your head. Look up Dr. Lombroso in craniology. Really weird stuff, right? But if you believe that a person is born a criminal, then you're not going to believe that we should give them an education. What you're going to believe is that if we give this person who's been arrested for burglary, if we teach them computer skills, and now what you have, Johnny, is a computer hacker. We can't change these people. And when I tell you I hear that, I tell you just go to any board of correction hearing. There's one next week. You'll hear this rhetoric, right? But it's centered on, it's rooted in hate, it's rooted in fear, it's rooted in not understanding folks, people, right? And it's really rooted in racism. And then you have another class of people, folks like Dr. Emily Horowitz and other folks involved with the program that say, wait, I do not believe that criminals are born, and I'm going to talk about language a lot, because I said inmate criminal, but they're not born. These are folks who lack the opportunities to do something different. And if you give this so-called burglar computer skills, what you have now is a software engineer. And it's the same argument that I made 2 weeks ago at the Board of Corrections when we were arguing about whether we should introduce paintbrushes inside of the correctional setting, and the DOC said, we can't give these people paintbrushes, they'll stab each other. No, I may just become an artist. My first inclination is not to harm somebody. And honestly, if I really want to harm you, I don't need any weapon. I'll bite you if I want to, or whatever, I don't know. Shoelaces, make it up, right? So dangerousness is not, it doesn't mean, having a knife doesn't make me dangerous. I have to make the decision to do that. So when I think about education and the role of education in society, right, not only do we give folks the opportunity to be able to provide for themselves, be able to keep their families together, and also that, but more important piece, when I start to see myself as an individual who's worthy of these jobs, who's worthy of being the mother, who's worthy of being the father, I'm going to behave as such. And I can't tell you how many times it's literally drilled into you, whether verbally or from the environment. How do you receive those messages in a correctional setting that you're told you're worthless? You're told you're never going to be nothing? You're told, I've literally had folks who I was doing time with in the same college class and say, hey, like, it don't matter what you get a degree, you're still black. I thought you were dead. And you get these messages that you're worthless, and when you start to believe that you're worthless, you're going to start acting like it. Look up labeling theory and all this other stuff, right? About labels and how we tend to live up to those labels, even when we place them on ourselves and become this self-fulfilling prophecy, where we actually live up to the criminality that's been put on us, right? Like, you think I must take your purse, I might just take it, And I'm like saying as an example for the sake of this conversation, but to really give an insight as to like how folks, the importance of how folks view themselves and the connection between behavior, but the benefit for society, you talk about public safety and hey, like we don't have to, be free from harm and things like that. But I think even more generally, I think the moral compass of our current society and where we're at now has been skewed so far to the left, right? That having folks who have been directly impacted by the issues, leading the conversations, right? Closing the proximity between many of you in the audience and really giving insight to folks can create for better policy changes and therefore create for more opportunities for people to actually walk into this so-called rehabilitation. And I say so-called because again, how do you tell the Somali Khalif Broward, Bally Ballard? I have a whole list of names from folks all over the country that say, hey, rehabilitation. Well, you know, some of us were just put here in a sense, you know? And I also think that it might restore people's confidence in our criminal justice system. I think that when you look at the fact like Khalif Browder, when you look at the Central Park Five, or I should say the Exonerated Five, and other folks, it really diminishes our belief in the system. You know, when we look at someone who gets 6 months for, it's probably not the best result, but 6 months for one type of crime, another person receives 6 years for the same type of crime, then it really does diminish our belief in the system. I mean, then what happens in a society where people don't believe in the current system, you know? Yeah, I can go for it, but it was 2 more questions.
So look, she has a question too.
Yeah, I'm come back. Say your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Christina Turello, and my question to each and every one of you is, what was the most difficult obstacle you each faced when you were released into society?
So it's 5 of us, and we can spend 1 minute apiece, and then I'll come back over here. Anyone can take it.
I'd say my most difficult obstacle was living. Like, let me live. You know, I talked about it before, when faced with stigma, and you're telling me I can't, or I shouldn't, or anything like that. Or the person you're telling can't. I'm now a supervisor with the city of New York. I work for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, but you told me I couldn't be anything but a drug addict. Well, now I'm a recovering drug addict working for the city. You know, so don't tell me I can't, because I definitely have to prove you and everybody else wrong.
Yes, thanks. Next. Kind of rapid fire so we can, yeah? Anyone?
So I think that the barrier for me was my appearance. You know, you go in places for interview, they called me sir a lot. You know, I'm not gonna put a dress on, that's just not gonna work for me. But that was one of my barriers. I think that people misinterpret, like I'm real intelligent, articulate a host of things, but if you're entering a place that is not really looking to hire somebody with a criminal justice background, then that's a barrier in itself.
So when I was arrested, my then girlfriend was pregnant, and my daughter grew up. She was born while I was incarcerated, and she grew up without me. Even though we had communication and she visited me and I always had contact with her, she grew up without me, right? So I went to my first board after 15 years, parole board. I was denied. I went to my second board at 17 years. I was denied. When I finally was released after 21 years, I called her and I told her, "Hi, honey, I got great news to share with you." And she was like, "Well, I got news to share with you." So I said, "Go ahead." She shared her news with me, and then I told her, "You know, we've been waiting for this time. We've been waiting for this for a long time. I'm coming home in March." And her response to me was, "Why are you playing games with me?" Because she had learned to live without me. My family had learned to live without me. They lost hope that I would return. So coming home, that was the biggest barrier. Trying to find space. Wanting to be strong enough to step into spaces with them. But then realizing that maybe I'm not that strong. You know, they had their way of living, they are who they are, they had this expectation of me, but I can't allow my life to be determined by their expectations. I have to take baby steps, and I have to know my place. That for me was the biggest barrier.
The biggest barrier I had when I came home was I thought I was a smart, savvy businesswoman, but when I came home to, I almost was getting evicted from my apartment because the person that I left in charge of paying my rent didn't pay my rent. My lights were cut off. Well, it was to the point of almost getting cut off. A lot of things were sold. So things, very expensive things that I had at home wasn't at home anymore. I had no food in my house. this was the big surprise that I came home to. Many things that I left at home was not home. And I have 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Larry?
I would say it was the biggest
What was one of the biggest obstacles? Yeah.
The biggest obstacle I would have to say is first of all, New York City is not that forgiving as far as like for adjustment purposes. You know, I've basically been out of prison 6 weeks, so it's all a process. My obstacles, I can't say the biggest one, but I would say like technology, that's one, because when I left, I had the best phone out, and it was a flip phone, Nextel, sure, yeah. And now I gotta deal with the smartphone, and I gotta learn and navigate a computer, whereas in federal prison, they didn't allow you to have a computer for various reasons. So I would say that, and actually housing, right? To be able to actually have a space of your own is a real big barrier. But I mean, collectively, I think it's too many to actually put one, but I'm up for the challenge.
Thanks. And we have another question, yeah.
My name is Alicia, and I'll just tell you one quick thing about me. My dad was arrested when I was 11. I still don't really understand what he did. So my question is, how important is it to share with the people who love you, like why you got arrested, so that they have a better understanding of you, and just like how important is that to like reintegration into the family?
Nice, really good. Can we have 3 people answer that?
So I think that part of getting locked up is that, and part of doing anything is illegal is that you take your family with you, and to continuously disappoint. Sometimes the truth ain't what you want to put out there, being that there's so many failures. So when you tell somebody the truth, right, you can't really control the outcome of that. So I think that part of it happens is that I just rather leave you with that perception that's already damaged than for it to be damaged further, if that makes sense. I know that I do a CIT training on Rikers Island, educating corrections on how to deal with the mental health population, right? And what happened for me there that one time is that as I was doing the presentation and they was asking questions, one of the social workers told me to write a letter to my son about my experience being a mother to him. And if I voted according to how the plan actually went of how he was born, I felt like it would damage our relationship, because there's no love, like, there was no love between me and his sperm donor. And to put that into words, right? Because you have to take a look at how your mental health is before you respond to somebody asking information, because if your mental health isn't correct, then I damage you further. Right? So sometimes you have to, people have to work on from the inside out, because y'all ask a question that you're not prepared for the answer, and now you're damaged further.
That's good.
I want to say that we talked a lot about stigma, about reentry, about us being criminal justice involved. And the one thing that we did not talk about was that the stigma that we also face with our family members. Be it real, be it imagined, it's still there. I have been home since 2007. There are still family members that I don't talk to that will not invite me into their home because they still see the drug addict skip. No matter what I'm doing now, no matter that I'm a supervisor, I got my own place, I got my own car, I pay my own bills, I'm still gonna be that person to them. And that goes along the lines of forgiveness or whatever, but just know that as long as I continue to do what I'm supposed to do, There is no way that I can make anybody else look at me any differently, you know. And as a person who's moving forward and not staying stuck where I am, I had to make the decision to leave them where they are. You know, that's still my family, still my sister, still my big brothers, you know, but if you can't see me who I am today and you still see me in the past, I cannot allow you to take me where you see me. My thing is to have a family is beautiful, to have a family who is supportive of you during incarceration and after incarceration is the best thing since sliced bread. You know, regardless of what that person did or didn't do, if that person is a member of your family and you still treat them as such, that's just setting them up for success and not failure.
I think that was a great question, and the reason why is because all of us have family members, and a lot of times we don't address the fact that, like, even right now we're speaking about a lot of stuff that we're going through, but our family does at times too. And you know, my mother's here, as I told you. I think she did more time than me. I think it impacted her more than me, and is my best friend. She's here today. But on the flip side, so on the flip side, you know, I thought when I came home, like, I wanted to experience family, and I thought that would be like this kumbaya moment, and that everything would just automatically mesh together. And to my disappointment, it hasn't been that way. But it's not a fault on them, because it's actually a fault on me, because I actually chose to do what I did. And as a quick example, like my daughter, she was in the stomach when I came to jail, so like she only knows me of being in jail, and like the couple times I did spend time with her, it was like I realized it was a connection that I gotta rebuild from the scratch. And in closing, it's a hard thing when you talk about like reestablishing yourself with your family, because you got even some family members that they're bigger doubters and naysayers than even people that don't know you. And it's like you gotta also work extra time to actually prove to them that you actually did change, that you actually did rehabilitate it. So it's a constant battle, and you know, each one of us here has gone through it, and that's it.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. You know, I'm also a father, like I mentioned before, and my little girl was 13 years old when I came home. And one of the first things that she said, she asked me, like, why'd you break the law? And I didn't know, but up until that point, well, up until about the age of 6 or 7, her mother told her that I was in college the whole time. So why we can't go to see that? He's like, oh, wait for college. So you can imagine the cognitive dissonance of like, wow, my daddy hasn't been in college, he's been in like prison. And what does that do to her identity? What does that do to her friendship circle and things like that? So there's a lot of resentment and hate. And when I first came home, I gave her all of the details, probably more than I told the DA. I said, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, but more importantly, this is why. You know, and the process, right? Like there's a lot of tears and crying and hugs and arguments and words that I do not want to hear from a 13-year-old, you know? And then comes understanding, you know? And that understanding may happen in a year, it may happen in 10 years, or it may never happen, you know? I think that we learn to pick the pieces up, you know? We try to do the best that we can. We do try to make amends. I don't think that I've met folks, it's very rare that I've met folks who have not tried to make amends to some degree, you know? And it's sort of like this resentencing, of course, right? Like, forget corrections, now I have to deal with my family. And what does that look and feel like? My mother kicked me out of the house 3 weeks after I was home, ended up in a shelter. Many people don't know that about me. But literally, I remember taking a selfie saying, wow, how I end up back in this space after doing 13 years? You know, and so there's those challenges around housing, around family, around just learning how to love. You know, I had not hugged a woman like 13 years. That wasn't my mother or my sister. you know, and now, you know, and I don't know, we can go for days. Anyway, we're gonna skip the last question in the interest of time, but I want to encourage you to engage these folks directly. You know, when you see them on campus, you see them walking around in class today, right? And more importantly, you took something away from this conversation today. You know, I know that many of you are actually not as removed from the system as we may think. You know, I would venture to say that the folks who are up here are not the only ones who come in contact with the system in this audience. You know, but more importantly, understanding the power of education and the impact that it has on folks, and then why it's important to have these same folks leading conversations about criminal justice, leading conversations about education, even if that means inviting them to like guest lecture in your class or helping them with your homework. And if you invite somebody as part of your theses, hey, I'm doing a thesis, can you help me with my thesis? At least take them to lunch, because I know that happens for you seniors. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, and I want to thank you, Johnny. Thank you so much. Thank you, Faye, Rosario, Jeanette, Skip, and Larry. We have coffee and cookies and Inger's candy that I will put out there. Jeanette has sign-in sheets for Professor Devlin, for myself, and Professor Lowry Kinberg's sign-in sheets are up front. Thank you all so much, and hopefully you'll come up and say a few words to our students in person. Thank you.